Good evening, everyone. It is now 6:10 p.m., and I will call to order this public online meeting. It's November 2nd, 2022. My name is Andy Gregg, and I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Due to COVID-19, regular meetings and public hearings of the Clark County Historic Preservation Commission will be held in a hybrid format, with both in-person and virtual participation options for commissioners, staff, and the public. This will allow for safe participation by commission members, staff, and any citizen interested in attending. For those of you who are joining remotely via computer, you should be able to see tonight's meeting agenda on your screen. If you can't see the screen and have joined by phone only, I will be announcing the agenda items as we move through the meeting topics. Members of the public and applicants that have joined remotely are attendees, which means you can see and hear the event. If you join via computer or mobile device, you can just hear the event if you join by phone. Other event participants cannot hear your audio unless you are acknowledged by the commission chair or staff and are unmuted. This evening's agenda is planned as follows: roll call and introductions, prior meeting notes approval, public comment for subjects other than public hearings on the meeting's agenda, as there will be specific public comment periods as part of the hearings, design and review and heritage overlay advisory review, facade improvements to the building located at 812 Main Street, an update on the Main Street project, a presentation from the Downtown Association. New business includes Clark County Historic Museum Speaker Series talking points and discussion, Revitalize Washington Conference debrief, then in old business, a report and vote on the recommendations of the Historical Promotion Grants Committee, budget updates, good of the order, and adjournments. We'll have roll call for openers. Let the record show that Heidi Mandler Huff gave timely notice of her absence this evening, and that Greg Foos is not in attendance due to his resignation from the commission. Jan Bader.
Did you hear that?
No, try again. Jan Bader.
Okay, here.
Julie Bond.
I'm here.
Morgan Frazier.
Here.
Andy Gregg is also here. Elaine Thatcher.
Here.
We have a quorum. Now we'll look at the meeting notes from the October 5th, 2022 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Are there any additions or amendments? Seeing or hearing none, I'd accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I second this motion.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes be accepted as written. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. At this time, we'll have public comment for any items not on tonight's agenda. We'd like to welcome Holly Chamberlain, Director of Historic Preservation for the Historic Trust. Holly there. Brad, did you want to speak at this time, or do you want to speak with?
Holly, you should be unmuted now.
I am unmuted. Should I go ahead then?
Good evening, Holly.
All right. Great, thank you so much, and good to be with all of you, even virtually, commissioners, staff, and guests. At Providence Academy, we have the North Gallery Porches Rehabilitation and Accessibility Improvements Project is complete. The Trust is very appreciative of support from State Heritage Capital Project funding, MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust, Kinsman Foundation, Price Foundation, and a host of other foundations and generous community donors. The rough draft of the Interior Study Report funded by the National Trust has been received and is in the process of internal review. Demolition of the laundry building and boiler plant smokestack is complete and was carried out safely with no accidents. The mitigation process continues and is focused at the moment on working with salvage recipients to transfer their items to them. The Trust has signed a contract with Sarah Architects for the design of the renovation and rehabilitation of the South Landscaping. It is anticipated that this commission will review the project in February 2023. The Trust has initiated consultation with nearby tribal nations in regard to any information they may wish to share in regard to the upcoming parking lot renovation and new landscape design, and for the new National Register of Historic Places nomination in preparation. Archaeological Investigations Northwest is preparing the DAP permit application and will address the consultation required by that process. The Trust continues its partnership with the Ne Plus Ultra Jazz Orchestra for First Friday performances in Providence Hall, with the next one coming up this Friday, November 4th. Tickets are $10 at the door. The Trust is grateful to Providence Archives for loaning an historic photo of the space, which appeared in the recent Columbian article about the event. Upcoming on November 19th is a special Saturday free program on the legacy of friendship quilts. 30-minute presentations on friendship quilt history at 10 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. in the chapel will be followed by opportunities to make quilt squares with help from the Enchanted Rose Emporium Quilt Shop and with volunteers from Quilts of Valor. Quilts made during the day will be donated to local veterans through the Quilts of Valor program. Over at Officers Row in the West Barracks, the Trust recently cooperated with local National Park Service staff on a national survey of ordnance in collections in regard to an NPS exhibit at the Artillery Barracks. I'm extremely happy to report that an explosive ordnance disposal team from the Army found the cannonball in the exhibit to not be a problem. The Grant House roof replacement project was discussed this past Friday with Heritage Capital Project staff from the Washington State Historical Society. The specs will soon be put out for bids, with construction anticipated to start as early in 2023 as weather allows. The Vancouver Barracks Military Association is partnering for the next walk and talk tour on Army generals who have served Vancouver Barracks. This free tour is set for November 17th at 10 a.m. More information available at the Trust website. The annual Low Legacy Veterans Day Parade is coming up on Saturday. Please come to Fort Vancouver National Historic Site at 11 a.m. and join the community in honoring veterans. The Trust is sponsoring a Humanities Washington Speakers Bureau presentation on Hidden Histories, the South Vietnamese Side of the Vietnam War, on Thursday, November 10th. The program, featuring historian Julie Pham, starts at 7 p.m. in the Artillery Barracks at 600 Hathaway. More information on this free program is available at historictrust.org. And finally, the Trust is pleased to share the news that Aaron Jaso Longfellow, Director of Event Rentals, has been selected by Vancouver Business Journal as part of the 2022 group of Accomplished and Under 40 honorees. She and her fellow recipients will be recognized at an awards luncheon on November 10th. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Holly. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time?
There is someone else online, and I don't know, we did not explain how to raise your hand, so I'm going to read the directions really quick. And Bart can bring up the slide. For attendees using their computer or the WebEx application, if you would like to speak, please utilize the raised hand icon. You can do this by clicking the participant button or icon, the location of which depends on the device you are using. Staff will only acknowledge those attendees during the public comment period who have raised their hand by selecting the hand icon. When you are acknowledged, you will be unmuted. When you have finished your comment, please click the hand icon again to lower your hand. For attendees using the telephone option, you can press *3 on your phone's number panel to raise your hand. When you're acknowledged, you will be unmuted, and when you've finished, please press *3 to lower your hand. Thank you. I do not see any other raised hands.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item of business is the Design Review and Heritage Overlay Advisory Review. Facade improvements to the existing building at 812 Main Street. Although this is a public meeting and not a public hearing, we will be accepting public comment on this topic after the applicant's presentation. Do any commission members have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest in this case? Seeing and hearing none, we'll invite Mark Pearson to make the presentation on behalf of the City of Vancouver.
Great, thank you, Chair Greg. Mark Pearson, planner with the City of Vancouver. Bart, could we get my presentation up? Commissioners, as Chair Greg mentioned, this is design review and facade improvements at 812. Been vacant for some time and repair. Main and 9th Street.
Mark, we didn't have it up where we thought it was, so if you could just give me 1 second to pull your presentation up.
No problem. Okay. For longer-termed commission members, you may recall a previous design came before this commission in August of 2020 and March of 2021. And I have included those.
This is Mark. This is Jan. You're about every third word is cutting out. So can you get a little closer to your mic, maybe?
I will try that, Jan. Is that any better?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Well, we'll see.
And if the commission recalls, a couple months back, we went through a heritage overlay review for improvements to the academy. So this is the same, different heritage overlay. Heritage overlay 1 is simply the academy. Heritage overlay 2 encompasses Main Street from about 6th to 12th Street. Within the heritage overlay number 2, all exterior alterations to buildings within historic preservation overlay shall require advisory review by the Clark County Historic Preservation Commission. And on your staff report, I have listed the key architectural features and guidelines for reference with staff findings based on the updated design. Here we have the aerial review. Thanks, Bart. Showing the building there at the corner of 9th and Main. Next slide, please. The street view of the east facade facing Main Street. The north facade facing 9th Street. They're from 2019, so I believe the building still looks very similar to this, with many of the windows boarded up and the building opened up. I know our building official met, I think, with the previous owner, I'm not sure, with the current owner, to do some mitigation within the last year and a half or 2 years. The heritage overlay identifies key buildings in the corridor. This is not one of those, but you can see those on page 3 of my staff report. And on the final not the final page, excuse me. Page 6 of 7 are the standards for applying to Main Street within overlay district number 2. And those are very clear. The rest are guidelines. So we look forward to the commission's input on the guidelines and the proposed facade improvements. But you're doing great. All right, next one. Next slide, please. This is the proposed facade improvements for advisory review tonight. With that, I will turn it back to you, Chair Greg. Happy to talk about any of these findings in more detail.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions or discussion from commissioners? Yes.
We do have the architect on the line tonight for more questions after this. Yeah, happy to talk process or my findings.
I'll start off with staff.
Sure.
Ask questions. I went through your findings. I actually liked your style very much. It was easy for me to follow.
I concur with that point.
Yeah, it was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback, commissioners. I have changed based on commission feedback. I used to do a lighter staff report touch, but I heard from the commission that they'd like a little more detail.
You know, it's a fine detail, and then I'll just ask you more questions. But under the key architectural features under, let's see, what did I have here? It will be, let's talk about, it's a kind of a combination between B and E. It's if we're going to do a new facade, because that's basically what this is the structure is going to stay the same. The proposal is for a new facade, not really for any structural different changes, no new windows, you know, those things. I was wondering, in general, like E says, you know, the texture, it talks about the texture and the color being typically that of red brick or gray stone. And I see this new facade in front of me, which doesn't really, it's not red, and it has some really dark gray, almost black, and then it has white. So I was kind of curious because I don't think that the color is very consistent with the code. And I think that was my comment, my main comment about the new facade, was that I didn't feel that I don't really have an issue, you know, I wish they would just keep the brick as it is, but if, like they said, they cannot. You know, I don't have a problem with the material that they've provided. I really like the slide that they put together there. I think it's easy to read. I looked up the bricks that they, you know, that they chose to use, which are a really nice tile that just goes over the exterior. But once again, I wondered why they chose that color instead of red. You know, we have the Elk building right there. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's red. Corner on the kitty corner is that little nice brick house, brick building. I can't remember the address. It's red. And then the other color schemes that I see in this neighborhood, sans the building to the south, are, you know, cream brick, red brick, or gray stone. And this seems to be going a little bit, you know, I don't mind the minimalistic, modern look to it as much as I mind the color to it. I just don't think that it is consistent, which will go into 5. I don't think it's necessarily that consistent with the buildings around it, in particular some of the very significant buildings, because if you stand on that corner, you can see the Elks building and you can see the other buildings. So I can, you know, I went there and stood on the corner and said, oh, and they have a nice rendition there so you can actually see it. And I just didn't think that it was really consistent with the code and the other buildings. It's almost like it was kind of trying to match the gray and white building that doesn't really match either. So, you know, if we're gonna go trying to be more consistent on Main Street going forward, and we're looking at this code, it seems like at least sticking with the color scheme is a good place to start.
Any other comments?
I have a question as well that does relate to the siding and the brick. As it is stated in the code, as this is Heritage Overlay District 2, we're only really focusing on the exterior of the building. And at this time, the brick is the exterior of the building. As part of this proposal, it proposes that the brick would be covered up by glass and then would be made the interior of the building, at which point it would disappear from the historic overlay and could technically be removed. So I'm curious if there was any discussion into that detailing for staff or the architecture of adjusting the exterior of the building so that the interior, or what we now see as the brick, would be removed.
I'm not sure I 100% follow, Commissioner. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I could have phrased it better. If you look at the current photo of how the building stands now,
Mhm.
you can see the different layers of the red and the white and black brick, the beautiful arches over what were used to be the windows.
Mhm.
That's all exterior.
Mhm.
If I have read my proposal correctly, it says that the brick is not salvageable or in not good condition, and that the proposal is to put stucco or glass over it, thus removing it from being the public facade, which would then make the brick interior, if I'm reading this correctly.
No, okay. I'm following that, yeah.
Okay. Has it been part of the discussion for once the historic brick has been made the interior of the building for that brick to be removed?
I don't think that would be possible. I believe, I'll have to defer to the applicant on this. I still believe that brick system is gonna be part of the structure and what's gonna keep the building up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that they could remove that, but that is a recommendation for sure that the commission could make to,
Well, so part B of that question, if the brick isn't to be removed as part of the interior, could it not then be salvaged and remain as the exterior?
I don't know that. We'll have to ask the applicant that in more detail. From what I understand and walking by and the pictures provided, the brick is in very bad condition. And I'm a planner, I'm not a building official, but I know unreinforced masonry is, as it states, not it's unreinforced and it not very stable.
Yeah. Sorry, this is a slight question that does apply to this. Didn't we learn about grant funding for reinforcing?
Yeah, I'm gonna go over that, in our
Perfect.
Revitalize Washington, plan for helping people just like the applicant to shore up their buildings.
Perfect, thank you. That's all I have then, if we're going to go over grant funding and might be able to look into the applicant later on the brickwork.
Any further questions on the part of the commission for staff? Would the applicant like to provide additional testimony?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Wilson. I'm with Wilson Architects, and I'll be honest, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing the conversation here. I kind of got the gist of a couple of the comments. I don't know if this is the right point to just address them, but I can say that we have gone over this design very seriously. Our client is very interested in doing something that's very sensitive to the area and to the trying to protect as much of the original historic character of this building, especially from the interior. It's something that he's taking very seriously, and our whole team is very excited and interested to be part of this project.
Would you be able to address, I know you weren't able to hear us so great beforehand, but are you able to address any of the questions that we had regarding stabilizing and continuing to utilize the brick as the exterior of the building as opposed to the proposal of covering it up?
Yeah, we have talked with some masonry experts. The existing weather-facing side of the brick is heavily damaged in multiple locations. Some of it is due to the previous renovation that was done on it, where window headers and steel structural items were cut very roughly into the brick. You know, the previous renovation that was done was not done with preservation in mind at all. And it's left significant damage to the exterior of the brick. In other cases, it's the brick on the weather facing side has just gone through many, many years of, I'll say deferred maintenance, maybe the nice way to put it. The brick is hidden brick, which is a very, very soft brick. So you can't just go out there and pressure wash it. You can't use chemicals to clean it. Repointing it is extremely difficult. The challenges with restoring this brick are very, very extensive. I think we've looked into it. I know I've talked with a number of masonry experts on it. I even contacted the Masonry Institute of Washington to see if they could help. And I know the previous applicants, you know, one of whom was Rock Manley, was I think the president of the commission at the time. And, you know, we've all come to the same conclusion that it's trying to get that existing brick to the point where it's a presentable face of the building again is a monumental task. It's a very, very large task, and is just not feasible. There's parts of it that, you know, we could, you know, there are ways to clean soft brick, but it would be very, very difficult to do. And it would probably not result in an actual, you know, it wouldn't look like new brick again. And then there's other parts where just the damage that was done to the brick from the previous renovation are just so extensive that any repair work we did would look like a repair. You know, we wouldn't be able to match the brick color or the brick type. And then, you know, how do we handle these modifications that were made very roughly to the building? So unfortunately, it's just not feasible.
This is Commissioner Frazier. Are you going to be filling in some of those rough cut structural damages that you're speaking of?
No, they'll remain. We'll
So
finish over the top.
So you're basically talking about putting just a facade over the hidden brick and highlighting
Yes.
the hidden brick from the interior only.
Yes, that's
Correct?
correct. Yes.
And my question to you, and it was also to the city, is why did you choose those colors? Because those colors don't seem to go with the very important historic buildings on Main Street. You know, the red brick. Like if I was going to cover up hidden brick, I'm not going to cover up hidden brick with ebony black brick. I would cover it up with a brick that resembled the hidden bricks, that resemble the other buildings up and down Main Street. So I was just curious why you, as a, you know, a designer, you delved so far away from, you know, the historic character there.
Well, I mean, there's no brick that looks like hidden brick. You know, we could choose.
Well, I looked at
other
the,
red.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's just
We could
stark.
choose other red bricks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was the design you brought to us, though. I understand what you're saying about the deterioration of the brick. I totally understand that, and I read the reviews of what's been going on, in the past. So I understand your struggles there. But I liked your design, and I looked up the brick that you were going to use, and there's tons of red bricks that are more similar, or even cream, because a lot of the buildings downtown have this kind of cream brick. Yeah, it's just that I felt like the black and the white was so stark, and that did not go with the historic buildings that kind of surround it. That was my only real comment about the design, was the color scheme didn't really seem that it went with the other historic buildings. So that would be my recommendation, is to relook at the very important buildings on Main Street, and not necessarily trying to reproduce. Absolutely not, because your design isn't a reproduction. It's, a minimalistic modern take on a facade on a historic building. But, part of the key element is trying to tie some of that in, and your design as it stands ties, besides just leaving the windows the way they are, that's all, and giving it a bigger cornice, which we really like. What else can we do to make the facade fit more in the historic district and give homage to the hidden bricks that are underneath it?
Sorry, I'm trying to go back to
I can talk a little bit about how we came to the color scheme. The existing building does have sort of various different white and cream stuccos added, as well as some sort of beige mosaic tiles that were put on the Main Street side. While the building, a lot of the buildings, although there are some that use reddish bricks, and then the building directly to the west has kind of a reddish stucco. By the same token, the building directly south of it goes with a gray and white scheme. Let's see, where's my context? Yeah, the 808 Main Street uses sort of white bricks, and then a couple of different gray colors. 904 Main Street, once again, uses sort of white bricks with black banding. The 901 Washington has kind of grayish bricks with white cornice. So, I think, grays and cream and white, and we do have white brick in ours. The corner elements and the vertical elements are all that kind of white cream type brick. It's really just the base where we did it with the darker color, and that was largely to tie into, the more gray elements, the darker gray elements on the buildings to the south. And then just it's kind of a more organized palette, when you're kind of focusing on creams and grays and whites. A red certainly can be introduced to it.
Can I
There's
jump in for just a
there.
second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. If I interrupted you, keep going. I apologize. I thought you were done.
Well, I was just going to point out the 904 Main Street right across, they did the sort of that green color, and I think the building right across the street does some like a darker green as well. We did look at maybe a sage green there instead of the ebony as well.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just looking at the code and what the code says.
Right.
Right, so I'm just going by what the code says and the colors that they should use in the code. So, you know, it looks like people have been doing, you know, various things, you know, deviating from the code in this area. And that's all there is to it then.
So, hi, this is Commissioner Bond. Thanks for your comments. I'm also just going to echo a few of the things that my counterparts have mentioned. But for us, we really need to determine, does this fit in with the code? Those are our parameters, right? That's our guideline. And currently, the color scheme really doesn't. Instead of using surrounding buildings that support the plan, it really is the code that should be supporting the plan. And the plan does specifically state that the color should typically be red brick or gray stone. And so I do think it's really important to have those elements incorporated. I differ a little bit from Commissioner Frazier in that I actually think it's very normal for historic brick to, it is soft. It should be soft because of the technology that we had when historic brick was developed. It's not an anomaly to have to do certain repairs or clean it. I mean, all of that, there's lots of, it sounds like you've done a lot of research on your own. It would have been nice to have seen that research, to read about it, to know what the obstacles specifically were from the professional masons. Because from my perspective of historic preservation, preserving and restoring and cleaning brick, it's a par for the course when you have a historic building that you're looking to do repairs on or changes to. In terms of the current brick that's going to be covered over, I'm concerned about the stucco, because stucco, I would believe, would actually have some lasting damage to that brick, and what makes this building unique will then, in essence, no longer exist. That was a big concern. You know, when I look at the code, the very first couple of statements are that we need to preserve the street frontages that represent our downtown Vancouver at an earlier time. So if we cover that over with stucco or with a facade, we lose that frontage. We lose that piece of history either with stucco or some other kind of fake facade. So I do have some concerns of covering that over. I think that is so much more interesting when you see those arches. Yes, they're damaged windows that we can't replace or get back, but we still have the image of those arches. We still have that hidden brick. I understand it looks damaged, but to me that's part of the charm. If it's not structurally, because it sounds like the changes that are being made aren't necessarily adding strength to the building. It's just simply aesthetic. So it doesn't mean that the building is going to fall down if it doesn't happen. It's just more the look. And so just looking back at the code with the colors typically made of red brick or gray stone, you know, if there was something that could incorporate this interesting design element that's already naturally part of the building with something that, you know, the code outlines, which would be something that could tie it together. Like you already observed, there are a lot of buildings in the area that deviate from the color scheme that is expected within the historic overlay, and we don't want to go in that direction. We really want to stay true to the intent and want to go in the direction of continuing to do and have high standards for how we, you know, implement new facades on buildings like this. So it does cause some concern because the code doesn't seem quite to be adhered to in that sense. And I do think that it's important to remember that the facades of our buildings are specifically mentioned in our overlay code, that we want to preserve them, we want to keep them intact, but visible, not just hidden behind some fake facade.
Does any member of the public have any questions for the applicant?
You have-
I have another question real quick for the applicant. This is a question, it's not my role to offer design, suggestions necessarily, other than what's in the code, but I did have a question. Did you consider painting the brick to represent historic brick, to, in a sense, so that the brick that is damaged, that is in some cases spalding or gone, have you considered keeping that look of the red historic brick, and where there is no brick, having an artist doing some kind of painting to create kind of a cohesion? Does it make sense? I've seen that on historic buildings before when there's been damage. They've used artists to replicate, in a sense, the historic brick that's missing. And I'm just curious if that was ever a conversation or part of that dialogue.
We did consider painting the brick.
And what I mean
Yeah.
by painting, I don't mean painting over, I mean painting like artistically to represent brick slabs. Does that make sense? Like headers and footers and if not, that's okay. I'm just curious if that was ever discussed. If not, okay, I'm curious.
I'm not sure I totally understand. You mean painting like the headers to look like brick?
The places that are damaged, yeah. So if instead of covering over the brick is there, part of the argument is it's too damaged, it looks bad, we're going to cover it over and create kind of a smooth, cohesive frontage. And instead, keep the historic brick, and for those areas that are damaged, have you thought about or considered filling that in with an artistic kind of rendering to keep that brick a continuous feature? I've seen that in other buildings around the country and historic areas. So I don't know, I'm not an expert in it, but I'm just curious if that was ever part of a discussion. And if not, again, that's okay. I just was interested.
No, that isn't something we had considered, no.
Okay.
I'll look into it, though.
Susan, was there any public comment?
We have the same people online that were on when I gave the directions earlier, and I am not seeing any raised hands.
All right, thank you.
Do you want to see if there's anyone in the room?
Anyone where?
In the room that wants to testify?
The question is there a projected start date for this renovation?
Well, our client is wanting to renovate this building for their own offices, and I think if he was in the room, he would say he'd start tomorrow if he could. The realistic start date is probably early spring of 23.
Thank you. The commission will now deliberate. Please keep in mind that this is an advisory vote. And so it's not a binding consideration. And so this is the opportunity to put the elements of concern into the motion so that the applicant will be able to take it into account. And so in the form of a motion, it would be the Historic Preservation Commission recommends to the City of Vancouver, and then put your points in. So if you have, if commission members would like to craft that motion, I'll try to keep your
You'll
talk.
start, you'll take notes for us?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would like to recommend to the City of Vancouver that they seriously consider keeping the color standards in the heritage overlay in the forefront when making their decisions going forward.
Elaine, does that reflect your concerns as well?
Go to Julie. I'm re-looking up one of the points in here that I wanted.
And I would go further than that.
Yeah, we're supposed
and-
to add on to each other.
Yeah, I would go further than that. I mean, this is a discussion rather than, I mean, I don't know if we have to craft them right now, but.
Oh, yeah, no, we are crafting it right
We are doing it right
Okay,
now.
then I would go further, a step further, and not just the color scheme, but, keeping the brick that's there and complementing that brick with whatever selection you choose. And again, I'm not an expert in it, but I have seen it done, and it's very effective, is incorporating some art and replicating that brick where it makes sense to do so, to make that facade more repairable in the look of it. Just to keep those arches there, to keep that look of that historic front intact rather than covering it over. I'm very concerned about the stucco. Stucco, it could ruin the historic brick. I would much rather have some other kind of facade that you've proposed than stucco because of that.
So we're interested in keeping the color standards and materials,
Yeah, we're.
historic overlay
really
district,
give that-
consistent with the surrounding buildings.
Yeah, and when I say surrounding buildings, you know, you can always find something to fit what you want to do. I would say those gold standards that are in our code, none of the ones in the proposal were mentioned.
Key buildings.
Yeah, those key buildings. And even though there were some in the proposal, the ones that are actually in the guidelines, in the code, weren't mentioned. So it would be nice to see how those juxtapose with those in the code that were examples. Just a block north is one that I'm looking at and thinking of. They have arched,
That's the Elks building, that's the
Yeah,
one that's on. the
Elks building.
district.
and, you know, it's just one block away, and they could really kind of work together in that design, so.
Hey, Julie, do
Can we
you have, sorry. Da-
No,
Julie, do you
go.
have, it's Jan, do you have do you have examples of the kind of paint that you're referring to that you could send to staff and they could share with the applicant?
Of other buildings I've seen?
Yeah, because I think like Ryan, I'm having trouble visualizing what you're talking about. So if you know of buildings that have used that kind of treatment where they've done some artistic component that helped mimic the brick, I think sharing those would be great.
If I had something, I would. It's really just when I've traveled and have admired historic buildings. I know in Ohio, when I went to the forum meeting, they had a couple of buildings that their whole entire side of the building was just brick, and they had done a mural that replicated a historic building. Like the whole entire side of the building looked like a historic facade, but in fact, it was a painting. I can try and see if I can find that, and maybe I have a slide from there, but I mean, I don't feel like it takes too much imagination. You just have to see what the brick looks like now and then replicating that through painting.
I believe the street that Ford's Theater is on in DC has also done the same thing with some of their buildings. I know most of the street was renovated, and then they re-renovated it in the last 15 years so that it would look like the historic building it had been in the 1860s. So I believe they have some of that brick overlay paint and wood overlay paints as well. So we might be able to find some photos of that as well.
Yeah, we can try and find some things, and then we can send them to staff, who then can send them on to you, if that's of interest. Would that be helpful?
So I have our recommendation. Historic Preservation Commission recommends to the City of Vancouver that color standards and materials be consistent with key buildings, and by key buildings, I mean the surrounding buildings, in the overlay district and the code.
As part of, instead of just saying the overlay district, can we specify that they look to buildings that are on either local or national historic charters that are in the overlay area?
Well, you can, but I'm thinking that given the parameters we're working with as an advisory vote, it would be the item that if you're looking to keep the color standards in the overlay district.
Yes.
And
There
also
are buildings in the overlay district that are also on the historic charters. Is that not correct?
A few are, but not all.
But couldn't we suggest to the individual to look at those specific buildings instead of just other buildings in the vicinity, which might have strayed from the guidelines?
I think we're supposed to be looking at the A, B, C, D, and E buildings
Mm-hmm.
under key buildings. Even though the Elks building is not listed there, though it should have been, it is not listed there. So I think what we're talking about is ensuring that facades and renovations, you know, use parts of the following key buildings. You know, it says right here in number 4.
Okay.
So when you're talking about key buildings, Andy, those are the buildings you're talking about, correct?
Right, I was thinking that in terms of the context analysis.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that the applicant, you just used the surrounding buildings, you know, the buildings within the same block. So that was a little confusing.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to, thank you
And then
for
I
the
keep talking
clarification.
about a whole nother building just to confuse.
Hey, we like buildings here.
I know.
Any further additions or amendments?
Can you read it back to us?
Sure. Historic Preservation Commission recommends to the City of Vancouver that color standards and materials be consistent with key buildings in the overlay district and the code.
And I will add that alterations to facades and the construction of new facades should incorporate as many possible of the key architectural features and should be compatible, it does say with adjacent buildings, but here we're going to go for key buildings.
And what in that, please tell me what in that is additional?
Excuse me?
What part of that statement adds to the existing draft?
Did you mention the key buildings in that? Did I
Yes.
not? Did I?
I said, be consistent with key buildings in the overlay district and the code. So we want to look at the buildings and the code with respect to color standards and materials.
Right. And mainly, we are looking at the building facades. We're actually not really looking at like the
Interior.
interiors.
Right. This is-
If we're lucky, we get to see inside a little bit.
So colleagues, and remember, let's think of it this way, that we will make this recommendation, but when we see it in print, you can always amend it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, you know, first of all, it's a recommendation only, and second of all, the idea is to help the applicant, and that we could, and if the start date isn't tomorrow, we'll...
It'll at least be spring.
No, we'll be in a position that we could alter, and I think they will get the character and tenor of this advice.
Yeah, I would like to comment to the applicant that I know it sounds like we're just nitpicking and getting very negative, I would say, on different points, but we all love this building and we really want this project to be the most beautiful new jewel or restored jewel on the street. And so we're all very passionate about having this project be as successful as possible, and that's why we're all as passionate about it.
And I would say in deference to Commissioner Thatcher that this is the point of the advisory vote.
Yes.
Is to incorporate the consideration of commissioners in an attempt to assist the applicant.
We want to assist. We're doing this
Well,
to be.
I don't see it as negative at all.
Okay, good.
I see it as constructive.
Excellent.
So we have
But as a recommendation, I think the wording that you've done does encapsulate what we've been discussing.
and gets the point across.
Yes.
And I think that's, it's easy, and the more concise it is, the easier it is to understand.
Yes.
To have, okay. So I would accept a motion.
I don't know how to phrase motions yet, so I'll just blunder
Yeah,
my
I
way into
move
this.
to, I move to approve the recommendation.
Excellent. I move to approve the recommendation.
Thank you.
I will second that.
Thank you. All right, check my notes. I think we do need a roll call vote for this. It's been moved and seconded that the recommendation be approved, and so Susan, if you would do a roll call vote, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, Jan Bader.
Aye.
Julie Bond.
Aye.
Morgan Fraser.
Aye.
Elaine Thatcher.
Aye.
Andy Gregg.
Aye.
We have 5 yes votes.
The motion is passed, and thank you to Mark for his presentation, and also thank you to the applicant architect, Mr. Wilson, for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
For the sake of continuity, Mr. Nortz has asked that we interpose the next 2 items and hear from Michael Walker with the Downtown Association presentation, as it will be a perfect segue
Yes.
to the Main Street update.
I
Yes.
agree.
I appreciate your flexibility with that.
If I can, really quick, I'd just like to take a second to introduce Michael Walker, who's the Executive Director with the Vancouver Downtown Association, as well as Teresa Brum, who is the Deputy Director of Economic Prosperity and Housing, which is the new department for the City of Vancouver. So as you said, Commissioner Gregg, Michael's going to talk about the VDA and their role, and then tie that into the Main Street update that Teresa will be elaborating on as part of the presentation.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, sorry, Teresa, what was your title again? I missed part of that.
Deputy Director of the Department of Economic Prosperity and Housing.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to present today on behalf of the Vancouver's Downtown Association. I was in Wenatchee, Washington for the Revitalize Washington Conference, and I was attending a session on preservation because that's one of our main pillars. And they started talking about HPCs, and I thought, oh wow, I really should connect more so with the Historic Preservation Commission. And little did I know they were in the same room as me. So kind of through a serendipitous moment, here I am, looking forward to connect and partner with you guys on everything downtown. So just to give a really high-level overview, the Vancouver's Downtown Association was established in 1989. So we've been in downtown Vancouver for about 32 years, working to revitalize the downtown community. We're committed to invigorating downtown Vancouver through a variety of revitalization activities to strengthen our community. And next slide, please. Our mission's simple. We keep downtown vibrant. Next slide. And we follow something known as the Washington Main Street Program. And the Washington Main Street Program, next slide. Sorry, I have a lot of slides. Is a comprehensive revitalization strategy built around the community's unique heritage and attributes. And it's actually administered through the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, and it's managed under contract by the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. Next slide. So the Main Street Program at large, it's a federal program that's administered by the states, and Washington State administers it this way, but we have 4 primary pillars. One is design, and that focuses on things like public art, public spaces, building improvements, design, education, and enforcement. Promotions, which focuses on marketing strategy, image building, retail promotions, and special events. Economic vitality, which focuses primarily on business recruitment, business retention, and business expansion. And then we have organization, which is kind of a high-level board of directors. So essentially, all these committees are led by volunteers. VDA is about two staff members. We have about 40 volunteers that make our efforts possible in partnership to really provide holistic strategies to meet the explicit needs of our downtown district. So I'm just going to kind of go into some really high-level overviews of some things we've been working on lately, just to give some context. And this is kind of fitting, so next slide, please. One is design, so kind of hopping into each of our pillar functions and giving some context on recent projects. Next slide. So this is just kind of fitting. Sorry, I just have to chuckle. Facade improvements. Next slide. So 904 Main Street, this building turned 100 years old in the month of August. It's a Kiggins building, and the exterior had a lot of failing elements that we worked to repair. the paint was quite literally washing off with the rain. I think it had a paint job in about 25 years. So we identified this building for a facade improvement just to kind of, with it being on a prominent corner and being one of our primary retail establishments, we thought it was a good fit for our program. Next slide. And here, looking up close to the building, you just see the degradation in the exterior. So we worked with consultants and our volunteers. Next slide.
Yes.
To do a facade improvement. So here you kind of see us, and now that this is definitely an educational experience for me, understanding more so that there's a color palette for the historic overlay, but we did things like, doing some superficial banding, and we highlighted some brick elements, which will be highlighted in one of the next photos here. Next slide. We worked to repair this sign. This is actually I think it was a wooden installation, so we worked to repair some holes that were forming in it. Next slide. So here you can kind of see where when we were examining the building, we saw this really cool brick detail, which we brought out with some paint, just to kind of highlight it. The building was built in the 1920s, so kind of a flapper style brick pattern. And one thing we partnered with the museum on, next slide, along with local historian Pat Gelato, was installing I think this is about 8 feet in width by 12 feet tall, a historic image of the exact intersection in which this building is located, which is really a cool throwback. And Brad and Pat Gelato, Brad Richardson's in the room with us tonight, provided this photo, and we got it blown up into this large form. So we worked to really create place and identity and showcase the community's history, and this is one way that we've done that recently. It's pretty cool to see all the old signage and some buildings that no longer exist up and down the corridor. So seeing people take photos in front of it, look at it, it's a constant passerby fun little Easter egg along the corridor. Next slide. We do things that are quite simple, like flower baskets. So we do the flower basket program. Next slide. You'll see these throughout town. We have about 150 of them. Next slide. We manage banner programs. All the banners in downtown you see are VDA programs. We work to do seasonal ones. Next slide. We do a lot with public art. So this next slide here, we have a mural that was completed last week, actually. It's called The Heart of Vancouver. It's spray painted onto the exterior of the building above main event. We partner with a local business, Local Boy to Tao, to bring in what's called the Great River Arts Festival. So in the last, probably now 12 weeks or so, there's been about 15 to 17 new murals added. We redid the one at the entranceway there at 6th Street. Next slide. And then you can kind of see here throughout downtown, mostly on kind of back alleys and things like that, just beautifying them with some public art. The next slide here is kind of an example of a facade improvement. This building has been boarded up probably for, I'm just kind of guessing, about 40 years, I'm assuming, by the looks of it. And then we work to do this little installation here, next slide, to just beautify it. We work really hard to promote connectivity through the district and to get people to different parts of town. And by doing things like this, it works to get people just a little bit further down the block, and also, enhances the perception of safety as well for people who are maybe unfamiliar with the community. The next few slides, which you can kind of skip through quickly here, street mural we did in 2020, some other elements we did on a parking garage. We did this cool mural on this tower wall. We also did that sculpture there with Movie Madness across from the Kiggins. Next slide. And then one thing we've really been focusing on heavily of lately is our clean and safe efforts. So in September, we hired, next slide, a clean and safe ambassador. And you can, next slide there. So we hired a part-time person to do regular litter pickup, graffiti removal, landscaping, and while also acting as a visitor resource. So we remove about 50 pounds of litter per shift, and there's about 4 shifts per week. So that's about 250 pounds of litter weekly out of downtown with this program. So that's been an excellent help. Today we did things like landscaping, so working to really enhance the optics of the community and also bolstering our community's quality of life. And downtown feels significantly cleaner since September. I'm not sure if anyone's noticed that, but I don't even see a cigarette butt on the ground now. I'm really honored to have such a great staff person helping me out with that. Next slide. And we do lighting projects. So one thing we really work on is the perception of safety at night. When it gets dark, for example, earlier during the winter, we work to identify nodes of activity that need lighting to enhance connectivity, but also to promote pedestrian safety. And if you can actually click on this slide, and it should open up a YouTube video.
Getting paid $1,000.
There's an ad.
There's always an ad, right?
Sorry. Okay, so this is just kind of a before. So that, yeah, that's the other video there. That was for Little Italy, I think it was 902 Washington Street. Was a recent project. We can go back to the PowerPoint there. Hopefully it. Yeah, I think this year we've done about 7 of those lighting projects throughout the downtown. So you really start seeing the fabric coming together from a lighting perspective. We did one at Pacific House. We don't have to watch the video. We can just go to the next slide. We replaced all the litter receptacles up and down the corridor. We were having some quality of life issues with litter receptacles being tampered with and trash spilling out. So we have a new secure standard that was based off of the input of the community. Next slide. And then we do things like promotions. So First Friday is our signature event coming up actually this Friday. First Friday contributes about $500,000 worth of economic activity into the downtown core on an annual basis. Over the course of 12 months, we have galleries, restaurants, businesses engaged. We usually have anywhere from 25 to 30 listings. You can go to the next slide there. So we do things like live music. At Firehouse Glass, they'll do live glass blowing. We'll have retail specials. So it's all kinds of fun activity. I really consider it a celebration of downtown on a monthly basis. Next slide. And we do a lot of economic vitality activities. So we work really hard to do recruitment, retention, and expansion. Next slide. From a retention perspective, we had an e-commerce program which recently wrapped up called, next slide, Jumpstart Downtown. And we assisted nearly 40 businesses with developing their website presence, social media presence in response to COVID-19. And that was a quite successful program, so that's more of a business retention lens. Next slide. And we also did the Parklet program in downtown when COVID-19 first hit. So this is also another retention strategy that we worked to implement. There's another video, but do you guys feel comfortable watching it? Okay, yeah, we'll watch it.
At Staples, we're committed to giving. If you're a homeowner in Washington,
I think the video might have
still paying for your electricity, then I've got some big news
Now
for
we're
you.
on why China's ex-leader.
A pandemic hasn't happened in 100 years, so this is almost new territory for everybody who's alive right now. Seeing what COVID did to downtown was almost like a ground zero moment. Just seeing everything shutter so quickly.
Our businesses need as much help as we can possibly give them. This 50% occupancy is a struggle for them.
When I ended up calling Michael at the VDA and just said, hey, I got an idea. What if we had designated curbside pickup zones and they all kind of had the same signs? Michael said, love it. Let's get Vancouver on the line.
So as the point person, I was the one who went around to each department and said, how can we make this work? In this case, 100% of the doors were open. Every department said, how can I help make it work?
So one of the ideas was to create a modular system, and then you can assemble them in a number of different ways, in different orders, and that way every different parklet has its own character, even though they all kind of tie together in a common language.
The collective work between the city, LSW, and the VDA, they pulled a rabbit out of a hat and pulled this thing off within a few weeks.
During natural disasters, you have to pivot, adapt for survival. So that's just a good example of one of our business retention strategies during the pandemic. A pandemic hasn't happened. I appreciate you steering the ship here. I know this is a lot of slides. So one really fun thing about this initiative, it was actually featured in, next slide, the 2020 publication for Pandemic in the Public Realm with the Urban Land Institute, which is a really well-renowned urban design publication. And Vancouver, Washington was alongside 10 other international cities like Barcelona, Paris, France. I almost have to chuckle to myself. But for pandemic resiliency, that just really underscores that initiative in particular, and was a great partnership. So kind of bleeding into the next slide here is partnership, and that's where Teresa and I are going to kind of go back and forth too with the Main Street project. As many of you are probably saw in the paper, Main Street is moving forward with an infrastructure project from 5th to 15th. It's been in the process since 1993, which is actually the year I was born. So it's been happening for a long time. And we're excited to talk with you guys about it, and also kind of underscore other opportunities for partnership with that project in the near term. Here comes Teresa.
Thanks, Michael. And if you could tee up the next slide deck, that would be great. And we think that now this will help you understand why Michael and I are here together. The city partners very closely with Vancouver's Downtown Association, and pretty much everything that Michael mentioned is a partnership between VDA and the city. And now we are embarking on probably the best partnership opportunity in 30 years, and that is the reconstruction of Main Street. And I see on the line is Brian, so unless that's someone that's on this commission, I'm going to assume that's a city staff person, Ryan Laposa, who's with our Public Works Department, and another one of the leads on the project. And so, let's see, let's go to the next slide, please. And you may remember that I was also gave you an update about 3 months ago, but I was not in person, and I think it's really hard to convey information when you're not in person, so I thought it would be better if I was actually here today. And the city has made a commitment to keep coming back to this commission during the project, and to give you updates and help you understand key timelines in the project. So what is the project? It's from 5th to 15th on Main Street, and it includes widening the sidewalks to improve pedestrian safety, considering new streetscape elements, enhancing pedestrian crossings, new LED streetlights, new traffic signals, upgrading water, sewer, stormwater, and repaving and restriping Main Street. You can see there are no buildings listed here. The project doesn't impact any buildings on Main Street, so we're here just to keep you informed. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of the timeline. We're really in the public engagement phase right now. Our first open house is November 30th at 4:30 at the Downtown Library, followed by December 2nd.
Which will be at VDA for our First Friday event. It will be kind of a casual drop-in opportunity with project staff to get an update and to ask questions.
Thanks, Michael. Then we'll be in the we are not even at 30% design right now. And so if you ask me specific questions about design, we don't have answers yet. But we will get to that point by mid-December. We'll be at 30% design, and then early in 23, we'll be at 60%. So we'll be in the pre-construction phase, then going into design, and then construction in end of 23, so really a year away from construction, and followed by capitalization, followed by the I-5 bridge replacement, also in this exact same area. And so it's really, from many perspectives, a vulnerable area in the city. Next slide, please. So what are we doing right now? So we are doing analysis of constraints and opportunities. We're doing investigations on the site. We're doing a block-by-block analysis. We just finished conducting a parking analysis, and we're also talking about placemaking strategies. Next slide, please. We are doing field investigations and studies, and these are all required for a project of this type, and they include historic inventory, and so I'll talk about that more in a couple minutes. We're also doing hazardous materials inventory, geotechnical borings, topographic survey, traffic analysis, mentioned earlier the parking occupancy study, and private utility coordination study to prepare for our water and sewer upgrades. Next slide, please. And an essential part of this is our business retention strategy. And so we've hired Julie Ahrens, who I think is watching. If she is, hi, Julie. Julie's job is business retention on Main Street starting now. And so it would not be a success if we didn't retain the businesses on Main Street during this project. And so we are creating business retention strategies at the city and in partnership with BDA. And so BDA is at all of our meetings, and so they're always up to date on what we're doing and also helping us with communication. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of before and after from other Main Street cities. And so another thing that we're doing is we're looking at examples from around the country of where cities have done this kind of work and what can we learn and how can we have a better project. Next slide, please. And this is, next two slides are Julie's slides talking about what she's planning on doing to send the message that we are open for business during construction. So this project will literally be storefront to storefront. And so everything in the middle will be removed. There'll be no sidewalks, no street, no parking striping, no crosswalk striping. If you were around and saw Broadway, it'll be similar to that, but bigger in scale. And so we'll do a lot of marketing work to spread the word externally that downtown is open for business. Next slide, please. We'll also do a lot of work internally. And so we have a website at Be Heard Vancouver. We'll do coffee chats, surveys, emails. We are translating all our materials. We're collecting data. We're doing block chats, open houses, and Julie's doing individual business visits as well. Next slide. Another thing that the city is working on is mapping Main Street. And so that this will be a layer in our GIS system, and we'll have information on each individual property. And then we'll be able to turn that into a marketing tool when we get to the point where we're doing some of our promotions and trying to keep those businesses open. This will be a great resource. It'll also be good for us to have as we're measuring our success at the end of the project. Next slide, please. You get a whole slide, Michael, just for business partnership and just the idea, I guess, being that we're working closely with BDA on all of our programs. You can say something.
Yeah, definitely. So during construction phase and even 2023, we're already identifying how we can pivot our work plans. 100% of our work plans will be behind ensuring that this project is successful. And in 2023, for example, we've been partnering with businesses to improve their visibility through signage, possibly some e-commerce assistance, so on and so forth. And then leading into 2024, we'll keep doing some of the same, but really with a really strong advocacy lens, as we'll advocating for businesses on what they need, what we're hearing on the ground floor, just to ensure that the project has the least impact to businesses as possible, while also ensuring that our corridor is stronger after construction.
Thanks, Michael. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end by giving you an update on the historic inventory. This part of the project was subbed out to AI Northwest, and they are working on an inventory of each of the buildings in the area of the project, which, as I said, is 5th to 15th. And so one of the benefits to historic preservation will be updated information, survey information on each of the buildings, and a survey report that'll come out, and that is due to be finished at the end of November. So this was a little premature to come and talk to you today. It'll be more interesting after that report is finished. Of course, that's public information, so we'll pass it on to you, and you can take a look at it. And then I also wanted to note that Brad Richardson, who's here, through the museum, submitted a museum visual survey of the project and provided some information from the museum, including a list of the registered properties and then a list of inventoried properties, 46 inventoried properties from the, I guess it's from Wizard, the DAP database, right? Yeah. Oldest building is 606 Main. The oldest part of the oldest building dates from 1871 all the way up to the mid-1960s for one of the buildings. And so it spans 120-year time period. The museum visual survey also included some features on the street to pay special attention to, such as tile in the entryways, interpretive markers, and other features on the street that we'll be aware of during the project. And so we wanted to make sure that you felt like you were in the loop, that you understand the project, that you know that it's not impacting any of the buildings directly, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I think if that's Rand Laposa on the line, he would also be available to answer questions.
Thanks very much.
We definitely encourage commission members to join in on the open house. There'll be visioning sessions and opportunities for input through the design phases. There's a 30%, 60%, and 90% design phase. This will quite literally be a transformative project for the corridor with a really strong placemaking lens. So we're really excited to see it come to fruition after 3 decades.
It really would be great to have some of you at the open house. We were just planning it today, and it's very focused on design, and it's the visioning, as Michael said. And so if you can get your voice there and talk about the vision, your vision, that would be fantastic. Of course, there are lots of ways to be heard. We'll have surveys. You can submit information or comments by email if you want to, and just talk to us when we come back and visit you every couple months.
I'd be glad to attend on the 30th.
We would love to have you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I do have a question, but before I get to the question, I want to say thank you so much. It was great to see your presentations. You're doing such exciting work, and so thank you so much.
Appreciate that, Julie. Thank you.
And I don't know if today is the day, but I know I speak for myself, and I think others potentially would be interested in learning more about the murals and talking to you about future projects around murals in the historic overlay as well. And then we would like to offer, I think, some advice or some suggestions on future plans that you may have.
Definitely. That'll be a great opportunity for discussion. I would love to talk with you guys about that. I think mural season's kind of wrapped up for heading into the winter season, but as we get kind of re-engaged on
prepping,
that'd be awesome. I would love
knowing kind of our lens and
definitely
things we can help, so you can do the reviews and for those buildings that require it and things like that.
That'd be awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, I want to echo my fellow commissioners' thanks for you guys coming here and bringing such a informative and engaging presentation. It really gave us a good, well, for me, it gave me a really immersive connection to this, which I already was invested in this beforehand, but now I really feel invested and would love to work with you on continuing this. I was curious, we have such a large population in our area of the blind and deaf community. Is part of your construction progress going forward incorporating wayfinding and different techniques to bring that community into downtown Main Street Vancouver? Because I know that there's been some lacking issues before.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely true. We already have some of the hawk signals downtown. I think the idea would be to install more. And in this design phase, that's consideration. Safety is really number one on this project. It's primarily paid for with the city's ARPA funds. And so our commitment through our logo, which we forgot to mention, the Main Street Promise, safe, accessible, and connected. And those are all words that tie in definitely with those who are disabled or differently abled. And so that will be a consideration. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you. I want to be mindful of our time. We did get started late tonight, and it is 7:35. So I would like to suggest, in terms of new business, that for those commissioners who are going to attend the Clark County Historic Museum Speaker Series presentation tomorrow night, maybe the people who do attend, we could put our heads together before the presentation as opposed to taking time now.
I can concur with that statement.
Okay, thanks. And so we want to invite everybody on the commission to attend, and so we'll go forward with our program based on who arrives and who wants to talk about what program. And so if you are planning to attend, please think about this as a platform for you to present the initiatives and projects that we're working on. For instance, the historical promotion grants, the public hearings we've attended, and how Historic Preservation Commission can be a service to the community and an encouragement. And so that's about what I wanted to say in terms of talking points. So, Brad, did you have anything you wanted to talk about at this time, or where did you see your comments coming in?
I see a file coming.
Please.
You can take 10.
Yeah.
No, he can have 5.
So yeah, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to just talk real quick today. First, I want to thank you for your continuing sponsorship of our Clark County Speaker Series. I have to always pause these days because we used to call it First Thursday, and we've changed it to Speaker Series, so we have a little flexibility with when we do it. And I just wanted to quickly just kind of give you a recap, and then I believe I've sent to Bart and Susan our proposal for this year's request for continuing sponsorship. And so just wanted to touch really quickly on both what we've done and what we have planned. So because of your support, now for I think 7+ years, we've been able to really grow the audiences and the communities that we're engaging with and bring more conversations and discussions to the community, which has been really important to do to expand the narrative beyond kind of our, typical Kaiser Shipyards, Fort Vancouver, and so on. We started off our season with First Families, The Next Generation. We had to go digital because I guess, Omicron was still bouncing around at that time. And that was amazing. And that was done in partnership with the Vancouver NAACP. And then we continue to work with Charles Simmons, who presented that evening. And we actually have him slated to potentially join our board next year. So from that really grew some good, strong relationships. After that, we did Her Story, which was in conjunction with an exhibit that we have up that's won an award from the Washington Museum Association. So we wanted to program around that exhibit, and we were able to present the rebel women of Clark County, so some unheard stories. From there, because of the support that you gave us, our team was able to take some really personal time with a local group named Music Fusion Northwest, which is trying to tie Asian American history and music together. And through kind of a generative conversation, we were able to develop a program that was called From Pacific Shores to Columbia River Banks. And it was the first time that I'm aware of within our museum that we were able to explore the Asian American and Asian experience here in Clark County. And we did that in conjunction with Professor Wang from WCU Vancouver, and actually had him present on kind of these initial findings history that we were able to talk about, and then have music interspersed throughout the program. And so it was a really wonderful evening. From there, we were able to take our show on the road. We went to the Covington House and presented on Vancouver's water system, and it was a packed house. Despite hearing that topic, people were very excited to hear about the water system, and I think they were mostly additionally excited to be able to be present in the historic Covington House, and we did that in partnership with the Covington House Historical Society. And part of the work that we were able to do, again, because of your support, was to model what a program would look like at the Covington House Historical Society, from development to working with the speakers to promotions and then final execution. And our goal is to continue to connect with them to hopefully facilitate and provide our skills to grow their abilities to be able to program at that house, which is under the cultural resources of the City of Vancouver, which is under your purview and the purview of some other commissions in the area. From there, we were able to do Pride, Clark County's LGBTQIA+ community, and we had folks from Clark County Pride, La Center's Gay Straight Alliance, and Summer of Pride all come and talk about their own personal journeys based on the foundation of Clark County history related to the community. So that, again, was a really engaging evening. And the list goes on, but the final one I want to mention is our work with Fourth Plane Forward. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Economic Development Group, Fourth Plane Forward. They're working on the International Corridor right now in Vancouver. And there is a lot of ARPA money that's going into that area. And so this was an opportunity that we had to have an exhibit, which was funded through Humanities Washington, that's going to be digital, that's going to examine the story of that district. And what ended up happening is, because of, again, your support, we were able to take those initial findings and that project and that exhibit that we're working on and do a presentation. It ended up getting an article in the Columbian, which a lot of our stuff does, so that earned media for all of us is pretty great. And in addition, the Columbian actually did, on top of their article, an opinion piece, and the title of the opinion piece was, "In our view, the character of the fourth plane, or a fourth plane, is worth protecting." And we're talking about mid-century buildings and buildings that really represent a broad and diverse culture that has organically grown. And there is always the fear of, when money gets injected, that we start displacing the communities that are presented there. So through that work of that exhibit, supported by Humanities Washington, and then in addition with the ability to present on it at a speaker series, I think we've made a subtle preservation impact on the potential of how we're going to focus on the economic development of that district. So that's kind of what we've been up to. Obviously, you know, you all are going to be helping us out tomorrow night. And then from there, we're looking forward to 2023. We try to be very proactive as much as possible. So obviously, we give you a schedule. We all know it's somewhat tentative as we kind of work with the flows. We already have a change based on the one that we sent you. We had a student that needs to complete, he's with the Vancouver School District, and he needs to complete a project related to a paper that he did on Chkalov's transpolar flight. So we're actually letting a young emerging historian have an opportunity to present for a full speaker series. And that's a part of our work of really providing the community agency and opportunity. We see ourselves as a platform to facilitate the communication of the story and not dictate it. From there, we're going to work with the Clark County League of Women Voters to do a presentation. We're going to bring in a number of Humanities Washington speakers. We're going to also present on a local music preservation project, which Holly Chamberlain mentioned, Samuel Murray Hawkins' program that goes through the Historic Trust. It's also Samuel that'll be presenting on his general music preservation project. And then from there, we're going to cap off our season, again, bringing up that discussion around urban renewal. We have an exhibit that's going up at the Slocum House that's going to be recontextualizing that space outside of the traditional pioneer scope and more as a remnant of our urban renewal and economic development in Vancouver. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity, and as I've mentioned in my letter, we've made the request for $2,000 sponsorship this year for next year's speaker series, which will allow us to continue to engage the community and facilitate these conversations. So I appreciate your guys' time, and I'm sure I went way over 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Thanks, Brad. Jan, would you like to debrief the Revitalize Washington Conference for us, please?
I'd be happy to do that. I don't know how well everybody's hearing me. So
we're hearing you fine.
Okay, so Revitalize Washington is the annual conference that's put on by the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. It's a combination of the Main Street focus and then also historic preservation. It was in Wenatchee this year. And fortunately, most of the Historic Preservation Commission was able to attend. So Commissioners Frazier, Bond, Mandler, Huff, and Thatcher were all there along with myself. So I'm just going to do a quick highlight, and then if I know Morgan went to a sort of technical session that might provide some grant funding for unreinforced brick masonry, and if anybody else wants to jump in with something they felt like was really important, please do so. Good conference, typical Main Street conference in Washington State, where they held it in various venues around downtown Wenatchee. So we all got to walk around and experience Wenatchee. One of the sessions was on, it was a Preservation 101, which I think for the commissioners who attended was nothing new, but one of the strong messages out of that from Michelle Thompson at DAP was that you need to work more closely with your downtown association. So hence Michael's presentation tonight. There was also a really good session on strong and effective boards, which I think will, a lot of the techniques in that will come in handy, and a couple really good keynote addresses. And there was almost 300 people attending. So it was just great to see everybody back in person after 2 years of digital conferencing. And with that, I will see if any of my fellow attendees want to say something. I know Morgan wanted to talk about one session that she went to.
Yeah, I do, and I want to talk about why Brad's here before he runs away. One thing that I found really interesting about this conference is I learned more about Vancouver and Clark County and Wenatchee than living here, and I was floored. I didn't know he had a Main Street program. I didn't know about Michael. We stalked him, we found him. But the other thing I didn't know was a program that's available in Washington State called CPACER. It's only available to 7 counties right now, and Clark County is one of the 7. I'm not sure if, and I'm going to make it brief, but we have this new legislation for clean buildings in Washington State. And currently in Washington State, the Department of Commerce has made it that all commercial buildings larger than 50,000 square feet meet certain compliance regulations for energy. And in doing that, and that's their tier 1, they also have tier 2, which is amazing because tier 2 includes multifamily buildings of 20,000 square feet and larger. These are all for commercial buildings. Basically what it is CPACER is a funding. It is a loan that is available to commercial properties. And the way that it was described to me is that you can, for instance, you have something like, I think one of the buildings on my list is the Carnegie Library, and perhaps the Carnegie Library needs some seismic upgrades. Maybe they need to come into compliance before 2025, right? So these loans are available through certain banks here in Washington State. I think the bank that was presenting was Kitsap Bank. And what these are, they're loans tied to the property, not the owner. So these are really low interest rate loans in this crazy inflation. And it is tied to the property, not the owner, through an annual property assessment managed by a third property capital provider, blah, 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 blah. The loan runs with the land and is transferable upon the sale of the property. And because commercial buildings are a large source of greenhouse gases, and the CPACER program is an incentive to help achieve our community's goals, as stated in the state's climate plan and also the county, Clark County's plan. So these loans are available to commercial properties, and you can do an envelope loan. So you can say, I'm going to improve the energy of this building, and in this project, I'm going to do all of these things. And one thing they really brought up was seismic retrofits, and all of those things fall under this purview. And we are only one of 7 counties in the state. They're going to run out of money. And I looked quickly, and there are 40 commercial properties on the Clark County Register right now. And it seems that, you know, maybe some of these property owners might want to know about this program while we still have the money. And I was thinking about reaching out to the county about maybe getting something on our website, pointing property owners in this direction, but also maybe even holding a joint kind of, you know, kind of get together so that we can talk with maybe a banker, maybe a you know, county representative about the program, and kind of get this going, because this is going to have to, all these buildings have to come up to code. I just talked to a woman who spent $30,000 upgrading her thing to save all this energy for her 1920s warehouse, and I was like, I got a program for you, you know, for your next upgrade. So I think this is a really valuable thing. We're going to run out of money, and so we only have a couple years to take advantage of this, and Vancouver should be taking advantage of this because we have so many commercial properties.
Yeah.
They're going to become non-compliant, and then you're going to be fined being out of compliance. So there you go. See Pacer financing. It was amazing. And I propose perhaps we could draft a letter and send it out to these 40 property owners, letting them know about the program and about the requirements that are coming up if they want to stay in business and not be fined.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
I think we need to.
Those qualify.
Yeah, I think the sooner the better, like we could have an information session of some kind and invite those.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, time is of the essence. If they're saying, you know, tier 1, so those are the buildings so the largest building in Washington State is 220,000 square feet, and it needs to come into compliance by June 1st, 2025.
Wow.
Wow.
And so these are things that are happening in our legislature. This is what Inslee's up to. These are these bigger things that's going on that maybe we're not quite, you know, got our pulse on those bigger things. So it was a really great learning session, quite boring, but I brought this all back for you, and I took one for the team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Julie or Elaine, do you want to add anything to this?
I'm very glad that we went. It was a very interesting, as a historic preservation commission, it was interesting to go to a conference that was focused on revitalization and to see how prevalent the destruction of historic buildings and aspects of buildings were in that attempt to revitalize. So I think it was really a integral thing for all of us to participate in so that we can re-examine how we are approaching the preservation aspects and steps that we're trying to take and enforce as a part of our roles.
Thank you.
I will say one thing that I took away from the very last session is that, and this is just not for us necessarily, but for small businesses in Vancouver. And I don't remember if Michael was at this session, but the Washington State Department of Commerce has just started a new website that's a resource for small businesses, and it discusses things like, you know, how to do a business plan and, you know, where to look for funding and small business loans and that kind of stuff. And the website is Evergreen Biz, B-I-Z link. So that should be great for Main Street programs, not necessarily for the Historic Preservation Commission. Julie, anything from you?
You know, I just really enjoyed the experience. I felt like it was a really good opportunity to interact with people that I haven't been able to interact with for years. I learned a lot. I did a presentation on the forum, so I kind of want to not go down that road of taking up too much time, but I did find that I found it valuable. I agree, you know, with Elaine. It was eye-opening, but it was also inspiring. You know, it had a lot of different elements to it. I went to a placemaking session, which was fascinating, and the organizations did such a wide scope of work with community, and I found it really exciting, really interesting work. They were doing a lot of watershed projects, but they were also doing a lot of cultural projects, working with Native Americans as well as different minority groups in Seattle, and bringing them more to the foreground in some of their projects and revitalization efforts. So that was very exciting to see and really inspiring to see. Really interesting people, really great group of people there.
Thank you.
Okay.
An item of old business, we would move on to an update from the Historical Promotion Grants Committee. Would one member like to summarize the?
I have been chosen.
Oh, you have. And,
I've been asked. So I can do
and
it.
as you present, please formulate the motion that you would like to give for the recommendation, please.
Okay. I'll give you a quick synopsis. We had seven applicants, and they were a joy to read through. Some really great work going on out there. We, as a subcommittee, did decide that we would put forward a recommendation for 5 of them to fully fund. The 6th one, there were a couple of areas in their budget that are not eligible based on our historic preservation criteria. So we put forward the motion that we would like to fund only the portions that have historic preservation relevance. And then the 7th applicant had a really great proposal. However, there were some key elements that were missing that we felt were necessary in order for us to make a final determination. But also there were some significant concerns about timing and whether or not they could perform the work they were suggesting in their proposal, because there was a lot of information lacking. So we are going to go back to the applicant, encourage them strongly to apply next year once they're a little bit further along in their planning and implementation, because we do think it's a very worthwhile project, but just not qualifying for the time frame that we have before us. So in terms of the recommendation, as I said earlier, we recommend that 5 be fully funded, 1 be partially funded, and 1 final one not funded this year, but encouraged to apply again.
And are we voting on this tonight? Because it would be really good to have those to know what we're proposing to fund.
Susan, are we on a time crunch to get this into the council?
We are. We were hoping to do a vote this evening so that we can get the materials to the county council for their final meeting coming up in December.
So are you asking for the details, Jan?
Right. I want to see what we're recommending to the county council. I don't want to just, I want to see what we're proposing.
I hear you. No, it's okay. Yeah, that's great. We're going to tag team. Morgan has the specifics in front of her, so she will go over the numbers.
Okay.
I don't have the big spreadsheet that Susan has. I don't know if you have that available, but we had 7 applicants. 1 being the Port of Ridgefield. Port of Ridgefield is doing a project along the waterfront. They're putting 7 interpretive panels, starting from time immemorial. They've contracted with the Clark County Historical Museum to do the work. That is one of the ones that we've recommended to fully fund.
Okay.
Say the amount, or do you need the amounts, Jan?
Jan, do you need the amounts?
No,
or
I just would like to
you
know.
just want to hear the good stuff.
Right.
All right.
I assume there's enough. Let me say that I assume there's enough money in the budget to fund to cover what you're proposing to fund. So I don't need to know the exact amounts. I just want to know sort of like what we're funding.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Right.
Pomeroy Living Farms, they're doing 19 panels, and they got a huge donation from a private funder.
Wow.
And so they're not even asking for very much money. It's a really great project.
Fully funding.
This is, I'll put that one at the bottom too then. Friends of the Fort has a really unique digitization project where they're going to go fly to Kansas, and they found one of the officers at the fort's diaries, and they're going to do some transcription and make that available to everybody. Then there's the Clark County Historical Museum, which is the Sound and Vision Archive, which they've been working on for quite a bit. You're probably familiar with that since you're familiar with the Clark County Historical Museum.
That one's being fully funded?
Yes. Yeah, I'm saving the other ones to the end.
Oh, yeah, good.
North Clark County Museum put together a technology improvement project. It was a very well put together proposal for some sort of technology improvements. They also got some really good funding from some private donors. If Jan, you were on the committee last year, Columbia Springs came back. This year the project is West Biddle Dam. Unfortunately, this is the one that we're not going to fund fully due to the way that they did the budget. They put some things in for salaries that we cannot fund. So we're cutting the salary out, and we're only partially funding Columbia Springs.
Okay.
And then the final one that we really liked the project, but it just they could not provide enough information in time, and they said that they put it together kind of at the last moment. This was the Historic Trust, the exterior exhibit at Providence. They really didn't provide a budget or a plan or enough detail for us to really understand what they were going to do, and there was no timeline. We asked for more information, and we got some more information about the project, which we're really excited about, but we are going to deny the request this year and ask them to please reapply next year so that we can fully fund when they are ready for the historic panels.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for
Next
having
year
those
would be
notes.
next year would really be helpful if, when we're asked to approve the budget for this, if we just had the spreadsheet or, some kind of so that we have something physical in front of us or digital in front of us to vote on.
Noted. Is there a motion to approve the grant?
We are all on the subcommittee. Can we make that motion?
Yeah.
And you do
You
it?
can.
I think you have.
Yeah, we don't know, Jan. You went to the board thing.
Yes, you can make the motion. The recommendation is coming from your subcommittee.
Okay. I hereby put out the motion that we approve the funding for the grants that we've discussed.
In a rare move, I will second it.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded that the grant recommendations be approved. Susan, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Jan Bader.
Aye.
Julie Bond.
Aye.
Morgan Fraser.
Aye.
Elaine Thatcher.
Aye.
Andy Gregg.
Aye.
We have 5 yes votes.
Thanks, everybody, for your work on that. It is a fun committee.
Quite fun.
And can I just make one comment? One thing that also came out of that subcommittee was some changes that we want to make as a group. We discussed some of the things we wanted to change to the form, but one exciting thing that we're going to do with the support of our staff is move the deadline a little bit earlier, but also hold a workshop of sorts for the public who want to apply to future grants so that we can give them some foundational information to build strong grant proposals for us to review and also help them understand what needs to go into them in order for them to kind of get through our screening criteria. So that's a new improvement that we're going to make in the coming year.
Great, thank you. Susan, if you'd be so kind as to do the budget update.
Absolutely. This is a continuation of the discussion we've had, I think, for the last 2 months. And Bart, if you don't mind, could you bring the budget document up? Thank you. So I updated the budget with the newest numbers for the attendees at the Revitalize Washington Conference, which reduced the amount that's available to about $3,500. And there's been some discussion in the past couple months about possible ways to spend that final budget. I did get an answer, Commissioner Bond, about if really anything, but also training, if training could be paid for with this budget but held in a future year. And the answer, unfortunately, is no. So if something is paid for this year, it has to be received or taken, or whatever the correct verb is, in this same year. So, can
I explain?
One observation on that is that since we did have restricted opportunities due to COVID, that the idea of leaving money on the table, we would, on a normal year, we would probably be able to take advantage of opportunities to fully spend the budget. But I think this is indicative of the times we lived in 2022, not having even met in person until May.
Julie, you had a plan?
Yeah, well, last meeting, I said that I would go back and do some research on CAMP, the training for commissioners that the NAPC hosts. And Susan and I actually both, we did some background work and spoke to the NAPC director, Marie, and also talked to Michelle Thompson, who is our CLG coordinator for our state. And there's I think regardless of when we do it, I think we should do CAMP, and if we can incorporate that into our budget. So I did get some pricing for that, both for virtual, for kind of their highest tier down to their like most basic thing. I think that it sounds like our budget next year is over the course of 2 years. So it sounds like potentially we could, when we do our budget discussions and kind of plan out our budget, that's something we could incorporate. But it sounds like a fabulous, I mean, it's a really great training. I can go into the details when we actually get there. I have a lot of it in my head, but for the sake of time, I can share all of that detail with you either now if you want to or another time. But either way, I think the camp is very valuable, and it would be really great if we could do it. We could do it virtually or in person. I would advocate for in person. They would bring 3 trainers in, and it would be 6 particular subjects. And they like to do it specific to the commission so they can get to know our community, and really tailor those sessions to the issues and the questions and the things that we encounter that are unique to our area. At the same time, there may be an opportunity for us to pair with another commission in our area. So there's some questions out there that we could discuss and coordinate with. But I did talk to both of them. They're both on board. The reason I talked to Michelle is because they potentially have funding to couple with ours that we have available, so they could actually contribute to the pot of funding to host or to pay for these camp instructors to come out. So that's still on the table. I think also they're working, she had mentioned that they're working with Tacoma to host a statewide camp for all commissions in the entire state of Washington. That would be a virtual training, so that would be an addition, but I don't think that would supplement our own camp here. So anyway, it's really a great opportunity. It's too bad because we were hoping we could at least put the agreement in place and make a payment with the funding that we had left, but host the camp in the coming calendar year because it's November. I doubt that we could really do a camp effectively between now and December 31st. So that's unfortunate. I'll loop back to them and just let them know, no, that won't work, but potentially we will find a way to do it in the new year with our new budget.
Another outstanding opportunity for outreach also.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, there were some other ideas. I don't feel like we should give up on that budget. I feel like there were some other ideas like a lending library. There's some other kind of interesting creativity that we have bouncing around. So I don't.
We could still have it as a December item if there's a discovery.
Yeah, right.
Truly, if there's a discovery in the next month, you say, here's something that we could responsibly do.
So maybe that, you know, some of us can just talk about, I mean, I think a lending library would be very helpful, but we also talked about doing some work there's lots of different things out there. I know we don't have much time, but.
I'm unwilling to just give it up with
Yeah.
a month left to go.
Yeah, we'll talk about it again in
Yeah.
December.
I think this should come back.
Put our thinking caps
Even if you
on.
had a list of books
Right,
for purchase,
right. For
Hey,
lending.
prices,
Susan.
we could,
Susan, can you,
Yes.
because we've already received the proposal from Brad to sponsor the speaker series next year. So whoever you checked with, could you ask them if that would be an acceptable? I mean, if we decided to approve that at the December meeting, and we've already got the proposal.
it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. I think that would, not that I can speak for Susan or anyone else, but to me, that's the same thing that we were trying to do, because we could have the agreement, no problem, now. Like, we wouldn't have to wait. We could get the agreement for camp now, but it sounds like we have to do the camp now. We actually have to do the activities.
Have to be
before December.
performed in 2022.
Right, that's
What-
my understanding,
well-
right, Susan? Was that, because that was the issue, is not that we couldn't get the agreement, we could, but that we couldn't actually complete the training until 2023.
I'm looking
You know,
for
we've
the-
given the museum its sponsorship money. We don't wait till the end of the year to give the museum the sponsorship money. We give them the sponsorship money at the beginning of the year, or in the past, we've given it to them in December. So I don't know who Susan asked, but maybe she could just quickly check on that.
Let's have that proposal come back in December. If we could fund the museum
Yeah, we'll put that on.
speaker series, that would be a good use.
And then still.
And I will check into that.
Still $1,500.
And that would
then the
still,
money-
and that would still allow us to have, the full
then
$10,000
the money
for
that-
2023
then that would
that we could
free-
use for camp.
Right, that would free up the
Yeah, right.
sizable amount of money.
That'd be great.
Okay.
That'd be.
Thank you, Jan, for thinking of that.
Jan for you.
Is there anyone that might want to work with me in the next month to try to come up with a list of ideas so we can have a concrete list before the next meeting?
Of books or things we can
Just
spend
things.
money on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Both?
can send, I can
Oh, yeah.
send you some things. I think that we can all put our thinking caps on, and if we can ask the question about the museum, that would be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, thank you.
So just to clarify about the museum idea, that would be to do the 2,000 preemptively or in addition to the usual?
Sorry.
No, I mean, it would just be to approve the proposal that Brad has already submitted for 2023 and pay it out of 2022 funds. So he essentially has the money at the start of the year.
We'll certainly check on it. I don't know if the logistics will work, but
Okay.
we will check on it, Jan.
And then, just to close that, either way, Susan, we'll all provide some brainstorming ideas. So if it's not possible, we can hopefully fill up the rest of the 3,500. If not, then we'll have 1,500 worth of ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll find a way.
And then
to-
Okay, so we're just gonna send ideas to Susan, right?
Correctly, yeah.
Including
Okay,
yours.
and then she can compile the list. That sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do that.
Okay, yeah, I will take everybody's ideas and have them ready for you. Well, maybe send them out beforehand, the ones I get early, and otherwise I'll have them for the next meeting.
Sounds good.
I'd like to begin good of the order by reiterating that Commissioner Greg Foos has resigned. And it's with sadness that I report that, because Greg brought a wealth of experience and expertise to this body. And he came on the commission at a difficult time because it was at the height of COVID's restrictions. And so Greg has discovered that he's unable to attend meetings regularly, and made it clear that he felt it was appropriate for him to resign his commissionership as opposed to being a part-time participant. And for that, he has our respect. And so we want to wish Greg every personal happiness and fulfillment in the future, and have that as a part of our record. And so thank you, Greg. It was a pleasure to get to know you. Any other items for good of the order? Seeing none, I want to thank folks who will be attending the speaker series at the Clark County Historic Museum tomorrow. And
For clarifying points, what time are we showing up for that? Because the doors open at 5, but the session starts at 5.
the program starts at 7.
Okay.
So if we could meet sometime between 6 and 7, I think we could cobble together a dynamite presentation. I'm
Sounds
confident in
good.
my colleagues.
Meet in the basement.
Being mindful of public meeting rules, of course.
Of course.
We, I noticed that it was, that due notice was given, and thank you to staff for taking care of that requirement. I take a motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
You need to move it, so we'll say that Emily moves.
Elaine.
Elaine.
I also now, oh my gosh, sorry, you guys all missed Revitalize Washington, and rename that started with an E was my name.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. It's been moved and seconded that the meeting be adjourned. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you.
Pardon me?
Silly Andy.